Hi, everybody, and welcome to Tim Wagner's Writing in the Dark. It's been a while since I made a video, so I thought I'd do something a little different this time. What I did was put together a PowerPoint, just like the kind I would do in a workshop, and I'm just going to walk you through it. So this one's called The Devil in the Details, using effective details in your horror fiction, because details are important anytime you're writing fiction, but I think are especially important in horror where you're trying to create so many different effects and trying to elicit so many different emotions from your reader. So why use them? Well, all fiction depends on specific details so that people will believe the story. You're kind of hypnotizing your reader. You're kind of giving them it's a shared dream, and you have to give them the tools to tell themselves the story. And details help you do that. They create atmosphere. They create suspense. They help readers care about what happens to your characters, so they give a damn, whether it's a short story or novel, about what happens to these characters. And bottom line, details make readers feel like they're living the story instead of merely reading it. The trick, of course, is making sure you don't overwhelm them with details or underwhelm them. You just have to do it just right. There's no particular answer for that. It's different for every reader, it's different for every writer, but in general, that's what you want to strive for. So here's specific details in action, not vivid, just simple narration, simple summary. There was a monster outside the front door. A man opened the door and the monster ate him. Vivid, setting details. Bob had his hand on the knob, was just about to turn it, open the door, and walk outside to check the mail when he felt the metal vibrate beneath his flesh. Not much, just a little, but it made him think that someone on the other side had put their hand on the outside knob, making it jiggle the tiniest bit. And was the metal starting to feel colder as if a silent Arctic wind caressed the knob outside? It was a ridiculous thought, but he removed his hand from the knob all the same and, without realizing it, took 2 steps backward. Now, any of you can take this first sentence and write a completely different type paragraph. But the point is, the details are what bring it alive. The details are what allow us to put ourselves in Bob's place. That allows us to have that shared dream. So, advice for using specific details in horror: your readers need help to believe in your story, and details help you do that. And you have a menu of details you can choose from. You don't have to include them all. You only have to include the ones you need at any given moment. But in general, your menu, you got sensory detail. So that's your 5 senses: sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. Trick about the senses is that we have range senses, our strongest ones. They can pick up information from a long way away, and that's sight and sound. Our weaker senses, smell, taste, and touch, can only pick up information from stuff when it's almost or is in contact with our body. But the paradox is the weaker senses have stronger impact on us because they're more intimate. So if all you do is write as if you're watching a movie, you're just going to write sight and sound. You're not going to write taste, touch, and smell. So taste, touch, and smell are like secret weapons. You don't have to use them all the time, but for any fiction, uh, because of that intimate nature of these senses. I've heard them called proximal senses before because something has to be in your proximity. Clear identification with a specific viewpoint character in a given scene. So you're not head hopping back and forth. Head hopping is not having multiple points of view, because if you break scenes and each individual scene's from a different point of view, or each chapter or whatever, or you at least make it clear where you're switching, that's not head hopping. Head hopping is doing it in the middle of a sentence or the middle of a paragraph. So staying with a specific viewpoint character for your scene, for your chapter, or short story is going to work really well. The character's internal world, letting us know what their thoughts are, their emotions, their physical reactions. Internal worlds, like anything your body can experience inside. Your memory connections. If you go to a playground and it reminds you of a playground from your youth. Any of these things make the fiction more vivid because it seems realistic. Plus, we get a chance to know your character a lot better with this last one, too. So similes and metaphors work good because they can tell us something about the character. The example I always use is Shaggy and Scooby-Doo in a graveyard. If they see a tree with no leaves on it, it's scraggly. It's going to look maybe to them like a big hand coming out of the grave to grab them. But if Sherlock Holmes or Mr. Spock would walk through that graveyard, wouldn't notice at all. Sherlock wouldn't notice it for sure. Spock might notice it but feel nothing. Um, Psychological comparisons not only create a feeling of atmosphere, they tell you a lot about the characters. So, good dialogue that advances the story. Exposition's kept to a minimum, just snuck in bits and pieces so it doesn't slow things down. You want to think of your story as a perpetual motion machine. Once you start it, it's always in movement, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but it's always moving forward. And there's a technique I call anchor points. This is using different kinds of details, a sense like a sight or a sound, a character thought, a bit of dialogue. These help anchor the scene in reality because you're creating sort of an overall world, like we experience it. We experience it as a sort of a deluge of all kinds of data around us all the time, and we pay attention to this, that, or the other thing, depending on what's happening. Like a louder sound will grab our attention as opposed to a softer sound. So what you do is you just try to mix it up. So you don't have to have like smells all the time. You can have a smell once on a page, maybe. You could have a thought once on a page. But the more you can kind of mix these things up and not do like the same type of detail in a row, like sight, 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 smell, 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 thought, thought, thought. As long as you can mix them up and kind of weave them in different ways. And the finding ways to do this, it's experiment, trying what works well for you. But it's a huge, huge technique to successfully tell stories of any kind, but horror stories too. So fiction's got to be immersive. People have to believe that they're in the story, at least, to a certain degree as they read it. So point of view helps you do that. If you stay with the character's point of view, it works really well. It doesn't matter if it's first, second, or third. Second point of view does create kind of a distancing effect that might not make it seem quite as immersive to some readers. And you stay in the moment. You don't have to describe every single little thing, but when something's important is happening. So that's what I did with the doorknob paragraph. I stayed in the moment with that character as that character was experiencing something pretty scary and made a choice not to open the door. You can always, if you're not sure what details to put in, ask yourself, what would this particular character, like Shaggy and Scooby and Sherlock and Spock, be paying attention to in his or her environment at this particular moment in the story? And what would the character be thinking or feeling at this particular moment? You don't have to put all that in, but as you're looking for details, you want to make sure that you do kind of ask yourself those questions so you don't leave them out when they're important. So here's an exercise you can try. I call this the shuffle technique. You can write several versions of the same scene, concentrating on different types of detail each time. So you could do this like with opening a door, or you could do this walking through a graveyard in the two examples I've used so far. So you write one version using only simple, straightforward narrative. And for the exercise, it could just be a paragraph. This happens, that happens. That's what simple narrative is. One version using only sight for details, then one version using only hearing for details, and so on. So you go through all 5 senses. Paragraph for each, maybe short paragraphs, but paragraph for each. One version using only the character's emotions, then one version using only the character's thoughts, and then when you're finished, you combine all the versions into one. You kind of shuffle them like playing cards, so you don't have like one after the other after the other. You're literally blending them into one. If you want to go ahead and use like a cooking metaphor, it's like you're stirring the batter until there's no more lumps in it. And you may not use every single detail that you created for this exercise, but it's a really great way to start to get a feel for how to go ahead and not only include specific details, because if you go through all this, you might see, oh, here's some details I never think to put in these types. So you'll get a better idea of the richness and what you have to draw on in terms of the amount of detail that you can use, but you also get a better sense of how to weave them together. And you don't have to literally do this every time you write by any means, but it's an exercise that can help. And every once in a while, especially maybe if you do get to a section of a story or a novel where like, I can't get it that detailed, you can try the shuffle technique. So check out my books on writing in the Dark, Writing the Dark, the workbook, and Let Me Tell You a Story. They're all about horror. And then I got one on writing media tie-ins called Just Add Writer. It's forthcoming. I don't know when. Just turned it into the editor not too long ago. And I got a couple books coming out in April. The Atrocity Engines, first in a series. It's kind of action adventure blended with horror. And then Lord of the Feasts, it's horror and dark fantasy, both out in April. So I hope you check them out. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and take the text of this PowerPoint and I will put it in the comments so you can just have all the text because, I just went through it. I don't want you to have to come back and take notes or whatever. And I'll put in some links for the books here too. I would really appreciate it. The like and subscribe is always great, but I'd really appreciate it this time if you could give me some comments to let me know if you like me doing kind of a PowerPoint workshop like this, because I can do more of them as opposed to my just talking about it. Happy to do it either way, both ways. I can alternate it. So if you got any feedback on that, let me know because I will really appreciate it. So thanks so much. Talk to you next time.